All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, it's Saturday, but this will be out on Wednesday, so it's Memory of Light. We are pushing through because we're actually going to have a break after this because Heath will be out of the country, uh, and we don't really do a solo show. But if you got a topic you want me to talk about, put it in the comments, and maybe I'll jump on while he's gone. When do you come back? You said
The 19th of October, so there will be no Wheel of Time episode on um the 16th. Wednesday the 16th, we won't have an episode. Um and then we'll be back. We'll be back October 23rd.
Oh,
And
and that reminded me, we did we'll be posting the social, but I forgot to we had a comment on our last social from Isomorphic. Uh he brought up Zercher squats. He likes Zercher squats. I love them too. It's a hard sell to your clients though. A lot of people don't like them.
hmm.
I like Zercher carries. Zercher carries are awesome. They're great for your posture. Now it does limit how much you can do, even if you're super strong, because like you said, it's as much on the back as it is on the legs. But it does, just like a front squat, puts the force vector forward, which means you can stay more upright, which makes it more quad dominant. So I do love those, but time and place and depending on what your client's preferences are, people just don't like the discomfort of having the bar in their elbows.
Hmm.
Okay, so that takes care of that comment, and I forgot to bring up the comments from last time
Uh,
on our Wheel of Time.
I just you made me think about that, and I just pulled up the comments here. Um, uh, okay, here we go. Ideals several comment and that we have somebody named Natasha who threw out a bunch of names. Okay, whatever. Um, Therese point on Demandred. I always took it as him finally getting a psychological release. We always see him as brooding and reserved, boiling on the inside, even when Morden cucks him out of being a Niblis. He always has to wait and brood for his chance at revenge because he is not the top dog. Now he has a Sarkinen and 72 channelers in a circle with him, which we'll see here. We'll actually see that. And oh boy, is it bad. He can finally let his balls hang. He has been waiting for this moment for his whole goddamn life. Yes, yes, he has. All, multiple centuries of life. He has been waiting for this moment. So there is that, but again, something that does come up here uh, is again him thinking, you were on all the battlefields. Where are you? Where are you hiding? But again, he has to know all the battlefields indicates. Well, then does that include the battlefield at Shalgul? And what does he think that Rand is just trying? And I can kind of see this, but I feel like there needed to be more of a point to this because it does seem like the one big gaping plot hole of the last battle is why does Demandred not know or not think that Rand, Lews Therin, is confronting the Dark One? And the only thing I can think is there is a logic to secure the area first, deal with the shadow spawn first.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and also he's realistically he's fighting the Rand before the apples.
there is
Be
that.
because the Rand before the apples would have been I am a weapon, I need to kill the Forsaken.
Mm,
And where this might have been a little bit better is had there been moments of Demandred poking and prodding him during that time. Because
true.
we have plenty of people poking and prodding him, but not Demandred himself.
No, that's
Yeah.
a good point because he does exactly that against Demandred's colleagues slash competitors, Ravine and Semael. He
Mhm.
goes after them directly and personally. So
And even
why not me? Come
Semirage.
at me, bro.
Even Semirage, and Semirage was
Yeah.
part of the Demandred plot. Well, maybe we can connect that. So if where all we would have needed would be a meeting with the Tryst of Demandred, Semirage, and Masana, and the other two reporting to him that Rand is this way. Rand will be susceptible to this kind of
Yeah.
behavior. And so we wouldn't have needed much. It just came out of nowhere.
Yeah. And there's another little nugget there that I just realized. to your point about the apples, is Rand's transformation. They know the dark knows something has happened because remember, Moradin references your little tricks. And he's talking about when Rand lines up all the High Lords and just looks at them and knows who's a dark friend. And we finally get the answer of it. Is Wireman just incompetent, or is he actually a dark friend? Well, maybe the answer is yes. But uh so they know this is going on, but they don't know why. So they don't know the transformation has happened. They don't know that he's changed. And he even thinks himself that he remembers being Lews Therin, but he's not Lews Therin anymore. And they're acting as if he is. So it wouldn't have taken much to kind of close this, what seems like a plot hole. We, the reader, I mean, you can make the reader do a little bit of work to connect dots, but they shouldn't have to do your work for you. They shouldn't have to make the dots. And that's basically what we have to do is go, well, I guess here and I guess here. So you could say, we should be able to point to something and go, oh, yeah, okay, because of this thing, now this thing. Even if you didn't realize it at the time when you read it, if you can look back in hindsight and say, I see how this connects to that. At the 22-minute mark, yeah, the different turning of the wheel excuse, which was apparently the showrunners or some of the people of the show have said, well, the reason the show is different is because this is a different turning of the wheel. This isn't exactly the books. So Ideal's comment to that was, that excuse seems like a lazy veiled FU. It's one of those sneaky debate tactics where it shifts onus on you to do the heavy lifting of putting in words why it doesn't make sense. They don't give a shit. As a side note, it reminds me of whenever I see Muslims debate Western personalities, they always debate the faults and flaws of Christianity, crusades, colonialism, and imperfect free speech. They never debate Islam. So let's not talk about how our show sucks. Instead, you figure out how it's not a new turning of the wheel. And when you're done, we will come up with another homework for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
The goalpost will always move.
Well, and you'll see this. I don't know when you started watching us, but we've had our own religious debates on this channel, because my own crowd is guilty of that too, which is the atheist crowd, because they'll typically turn to the atrocities of religions, all religions, and say, this is why we're right. And it's like, no, that's not why you're right. So we've actually debated on more of the grounds of falsifiability and, that kind of stuff. So those are pretty good, interesting conversations if you want to go back and look for them. I think they're all labeled in a way that they'll be easy to find.
Yeah.
Sunday School with Heath is usually the start of that. Yeah.
Yep. To the Avienda casting, I thought Mackenzie Davis would be good. The chick who was sent from the future in the latest Terminator. If you saw the previews, that she's really tall, muscular, blonde woman, built like a high level volleyball player. Really is how I would describe her. I always thought she was the only good part of the movie, though admittedly she has more of a tomboyish look. Avienda is supposed to be fit but womanly. Well, you can't have it all.
Yeah, I've trained a lot of volleyball players in my life, and the running joke is usually like, I've worked with Sarah since she was this tall, and that was when they were in junior high, And so yes, they exist, these very tall athletic women.
Yeah.
And they're also quite feminine. Sarah, and the one I just brought up, she's a girl's girl, but she was very athletic and very competitive. So
yeah. The subtle mistakes made by great captains are akin to the Secret Service mistakes before the first assassination attempt. I would add the second assassination attempt as well, if you look into that. At Trump.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cough that much, but you made me breathe in some spit on that comment. I wish I would have read these ahead of time.
Yeah. I think that was the idea. Maintain plausible deniability.
Well, especially with the new information that has come out in the last couple days too, where they just arrested a Pakistani guy working for Iran who was offering $1 million bounty on the head of the person, and they caught him the day before the missed shot. So yeah, that guy might not have been working for them, but at the same time, they have a plot the day before, and everything else around it.
Hmm.
It's just one more data point in. Oh my gosh, maybe he shouldn't have been out there or been behind a bubble of bulletproof
Well,
glass or
yeah.
something. Yeah.
One of the hold on, this looks sketchy, much like the strange little mistakes the great captains are having that started several hundred pages ago of Land going, well, that's odd. Why did this happen? Of um according to a whistleblower, they did not do a pre sweep.
Hmm.
There were people out ahead and behind as standard, but they're supposed to sweep. And their excuse is, well, it was last minute. It wasn't on the schedule. Okay, well, even last minute, you can do a rushed sweep to just go out and check the whole
Are
course
you? Oh, you're
before it
talking
even
about the
goes
golf
out
course. I
there.
was talking about
No,
Pennsylvania.
oh no, I was talking about the golf course because Ideals made the mention of the first attempt, and I'm saying, and the second attempt, this is sketchy as heck now too. You know, and according to uh, the head football coach of the Minnesota Vikings, um, I hadn't noticed that before. Now I can't unsee it. We were texting on as we were watching football,
Let me
and
add context to this real quick.
yeah,
I watched the Vikings game because my Texans were playing them, and I hadn't seen the head coach in detail for that. And the Vikings head coach looks like Matt Gates
yeah,
from the Florida congressperson. And
yeah.
and I texted that to Heath, and now he can't unsee it.
I
So
cannot unsee it. Um, but he has had a whistleblower in the Secret Service tell him that or Secret Service or FBI, they know of 5 kill teams that are in the U.S.
mhm.
specifically targeting Trump, and this has been known.
Which,
So now the
not to be
mistakes don't
realistic,
look
maybe
too
this
much like
is
mistakes.
yeah, it's going to be a long time for our next social episode, but maybe it'll still be relevant to there. Is anybody not questioning why Iran seems to want Harris as our president? That's just a good question to ask, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Um,
All
all right.
right.
So,
Back
and
to
then we
task.
have what is clearly not a secret code to me because I am not going on a secret mission. I am going on vacation. So that is not what that random comment full of random words is. Definitely not a secret
Well, we
mission.
skipped over one subtle mistakes
Oh,
made, but oh no
no, that
you
was the
wanted
one I
to
was
yeah
talking
yeah
about. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
he
I
was
have no idea.
making the
I'm
analogy
I'm
there.
almost afraid to click on the name because I'm.
Yeah.
Let
Yeah.
me do this. Hold on.
All right. So
Let's see her YouTube profile.
we'll see what the
It's actually a channel that you can subscribe to,
maybe just trying
but
to get
there's nothing
clicks.
on it.
We are in chapter 35. Here we
It's
go.
isomorphic. It's you. It's a Russian bot.
Oh no, maybe
That's what
someone's
people are
after
going to accuse
isomorphic.
us of because we do so
Yeah.
many political episodes. And don't shy away because you're our new friend. But even though you talk openly about your low trust society and why everything is so wrong with that's going to be the straw man that people would use against us. And they'd be like, oh, well, your biggest follower is Russian. It's like, yeah, Russia's a massive place with, oh my gosh, individuals inside of it,
Hmm.
and that it's like, I'm actually happy you're here. And I'm like, wow, we get a different perspective on things from a cultural level because, yeah, there's a difference. People mistake. One of the biggest mistakes we make as Americans is because most Russians are white, we say, oh, that we treat them like they're European.
Hmm.
And it's like, no, they're completely different. They have their own culture. It's different.
Well, Patton said that, before his death, is that we think they're like us, but are us Americans, but we come from Western Europe. It's different. He used the word they're Asiatic, and people nowadays, because we associate Asia with East Asia, well, no, there is a Central Asia, and it is different from East Asia. It is different from Europe. It's different.
Well,
They have a very different history.
and people just forget because we like to clump things together. Look at the difference between a Texan and someone from New York, right? There's a lot of differences between someone from Ghana and from the Congo
Mhm.
and from Ethiopia. They're all on the same continent. Argentinians are way different than Brazilians, which are way different than people from Chile, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say
It's
Chile because they don't get along.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Chile is apparently the place to go. A lot of business people I talk to are like, if things go down here, I'm going to Chile. So it's
Oh, it could be Argentina if this keeps going. If the guy with the chainsaw keeps chainsawing.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well,
all
apparently
right.
Chile was where we are now, like 20 years ago,
Oh,
and they're on the other side of it. So that gives
oh,
me hope. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
All right. So, uh, this will be a bit of an odd episode, as we said, because we have to stop in the middle. Originally, I was thinking,
Middle
well,
of a
so,
chapter, not stop in the middle of the episode. The way you
uh,
phrased that could
yeah,
have,
yeah.
yeah.
So when I was first looking at what was coming up, I said, "Ugh, should we do a quickie?" And then the next episode would just be all chapter 37. And I thought, no, let's see how many notes I have. And yeah, I don't have very much to say on chapter 35 and 36, so we might as well keep going. But in the first edition hardcover, which is a big book, it's 190 pages.
I
It
just
is a
had an
long chapter.
in 35, my biggest comment
I have one
was
note.
I have a note and it's still on Sanderson that he kind of makes things cartoony and caricature. He just talks about how 14 people just died for random reasons,
Yeah,
but then he has a wagon driver walk up to the damn tree
yeah,
with blood coming out of it, and you
because
have
he
like
he
and
needs
it's like a bad horror movie moment where the woman runs upstairs instead of out the door into the running
it,
car, you
okay,
know?
and structure plot wise, I can see why he did it. He wanted that shocking moment, because then from that we get, because we're in Oliver's point of view, and from that we get, well, it's not anything worse than I've seen already, because
Mhm.
Oliver's had a rough life. He's 10 to 12 years old. We're not exactly sure. And he's stunted. He's short for his age in large part. He's probably stunted from lack of nutrition. Plus, all the death and destruction he's seen. Because remember, even before the Aiel came, Karheen had already descended into civil war. So
Well, and this
he's
is
seen
this is
more
a
than enough.
discussion that I have because in Oliver's point of view, he keeps going back to hating the Shido,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And he hates all Aiel, but the Shido
But the
because
Shadow
of
most of all, yeah.
most of all, and he wants to use the other Aiel to get to this. This is a discussion I have with the Wokies in some of my classes. Is they're like, oh, racism, da 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 da. I'm like, imagine being a 12-year-old white girl in southern Mississippi or something, and yeah, 99.99999% of the people of color around you are great people. But you were raped by that one when you were 12. Now you grow up and you have this bias. That's actually understandable. And they're like, oh, it's horrible. I'm like, no, it's horrible what happened to her.
Hmm.
It's horrible that she grew up with that bias, but it's not her fault. And we need to figure out how to change that mindset. And Olver's in that spot,
Hmm.
and he wants to use these people to get back at this other people that's similar to those people because he was traumatized.
Hmm.
And if you understand that, oh my gosh, it doesn't become this political tool. It becomes, let me help this person.
And that part of it is good. It's just, to your point, yeah, that is really glaring, that when that guy gets killed by the tree right here at the beginning of the chapter, because he's just thinking about all the people that have died to the terrible things in the blight. You could have just had a flashback to the last one who died. The last person who died got too close to this tree, but it wasn't
Or
anything worse
or
than I've
you,
already seen before.
you could have had it without the guy walking up to the tree.
Yeah.
You could have had,
He's dodging one of those mud puddles, those
yeah,
acidic
yeah.
mud puddles, and he gets too close to a tree, because that would illustrate the dangers of the blight even further, because you're trying to step around this one thing and you step into something else because
Mm-hmm.
everything wants to kill you.
Yeah, or it was a normal looking tree until it killed that guy and then it had the blood coming out of it.
And
All of
it's
these things were available, but there's this it's this we one of my favorite commercials. It was the one where it was mocking horror movies, and these four teenageish young adult people are running, and they're like, oh my gosh, and you hear the chainsaws in the background, and one of the ladies says, hey, let's go to the car that's running over there and get away. And one of the
yeah,
other
yeah,
ones
yeah.
says, oh no, let's go hide behind the chainsaws.
Yeah, it's
And
like
they all
it's like
say,
an
that
insurance
makes
commercial
better
or something.
sense. And they run
Yeah.
back there, and the chainsaw guy is like, really? That's what that felt like to me. It was like a caricature of a caricature of a caricature. Yeah.
And it's a shame, and it's I think the reason the nitpicks for Sanderson are so frequent and significant is because they are so glaring. Not just, I mean, we've tried as best as we can to understand this was an impossible task following up not just, another author, but one of the bigger, more successful ones in the genre, right? That this was at the time, I mean, this was what Harry Potter became. Only Harry Potter was even bigger because it had the movies. But before Harry Potter, the biggest fantasy series was Wheel of Time. And I've looked up the numbers and shared them before of its, not sure, but hundreds of millions of copies sold worldwide. So it is an impossible task. So the differences are glaring because we have so much depth and breadth with Jordan, because we have a huge library of books, of 12 books leading up to when Sanderson takes over.
Mm-hmm.
But also the incongruities are glaring even within Sanderson's own work, because that one moment there that stands out as such a ridiculous don't run to the running car or horror movie trope, because the rest of the chapter is really good. There's nothing outstanding that happens, because I literally, as I said, I only have the one note, Bella the Wonder Horse, because we start off with Bella. And
Mm-hmm.
it made me wonder, is this an RJ note or is this a bit of Sanderson fan service? Because again, he was a fan long before he became the author or even a author of his own stuff. And one of the kind of running jokes on the forums was wondering if it was a running joke that Bella just kind of seemed to be everywhere, right? Bella just shows up and it's like, oh, you know, there she was literally from the very beginning, because we get her name as Tam and Rand are walking her along the cart path. Um, but it's good, even if it's fan service done right. It's not over the top. Yeah, it is a little bit of a chuckle, but it's also understandable because of, where all this came from. That, oh yeah, so the caravan came from the White Tower, was organized there, so it's believable, it's conceivable. And then you also get that fun moment because from, one of the first times we see Oliver, he's at the racetrack in Ibu Dar, and so it works because he's trying to get the shaggy, you know, cart mare to go faster, and she just can't or won't. It's fan service that works, and it's and he does it well. My other thought, as the more I read, because it starts with the laugh of the fan service, but then as you read, it's he writes this childlike point of view really well, because it would be really easy to make him simple Jack because he's a kid. But Sanderson manages to write the view of someone who is mature for their age because they've had to grow up hard and fast, but still a kid. Those you talked about the bias against the Aiel, and yet he has this idea that he's going to go out there and demand that they train him and they'll hate him,
Mm-hmm.
but then he'll earn their respect. And it's because that's the stuff that happens in stories. And you fully believe that Oliver fully believes this, which is the mind of a child, without being simple, without being simplistic. Um,
But then in the end of that chapter, though, we get to the absolutely completely unnecessary scene,
mm-hmm,
which is Van and Harnan and the horn.
mm-hmm.
What the hell was up with that? I remember Theoryland being like all up in arms about that, and I'm trying to find
It,
it here.
we find out later what was going on there. It's a red herring. It's I'm going to throw you off. I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
clever, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
but it wasn't clever and it was stupid.
mhm.
The whole thing behind it was, oh, well, they were just trying to get to the tobacco. And
Yeah.
it's like, but they also wouldn't steal Matt's tobacco. I mean, that's
I think Sanderson thinks he set this up by Fail asking what kind of a man Vannon is, and I think she's talking to Mandavin at the time,
Hmm.
and he says,
Man
"Oh, sure,
Vedwin, by the
okay, uh,
way.
whatever." Uh, hey, I'm proud of myself that I have this since we've started recording. I've actually said Fail instead of fail. Okay.
Mandevwin, excuse me, Mandevwin.
Um, but what he says in response, the analogy he uses is he might borrow your flask of brandy and return it mostly empty. You know,
Yeah, but also
so Sanderson thinks he set it up.
Sanderson ruined that by her cover story of I used that chest for my own personal effects. And so,
Yeah. So I think the logic is, oh, so you dumped the tobacco, and this must be what
mhm.
you dumped out in the forest because then you put your stuff in the chest. But I think it is one of the, in contrast to the Oliver point of view section, which is, pretty good, pretty fun. And then we've got a brief Avienda section here where the only interesting thing we learn is that I couldn't remember what was going on, and I thought Grendel was going into the world of dreams in the flesh, and that's how she was getting away without a gateway. And then Katsewin reveals, no, there are accounts of this, and she's using the true power. Oh, okay, fine.
Mhm.
Um, but uh when we get to this point, the lead up to it is fine. But as I've complained about before, Sanderson doesn't write action very well. His action scenes get kind of confusing and
Maybe
often
because
requires
he's
me to
a
read multiple
chubby
times.
nerd that never felt any action in his entire life. He just always
Yeah,
got it through stories.
because even if I'm writing, if I'm writing the duel in the prologue that the between Galad and what's his bucket? I just brain farted on the guy's name that he kills.
Asanawa.
Uh, no, he's the questioner.
Oh,
He's the head questioner.
Valda.
Valda.
Yeah.
So no, I've never been in a sword duel. I've done a little bit of knife work in Kali, and I had a friend who did a lot of Akindo work, and he tried to teach me some stuff. But I have fought someone one on one in an MMA or in a kickboxing setting, so I at least have a basis that
Mhm.
I can, you know, to RJ's point about the, well, my combat experience isn't applicable because I'm writing in a fantasy world, but the mindset of a veteran is applicable. I have that
Well,
foundation.
and then there's a layer to that that Jordan had that I can attest to is there is a massive difference because I've had both situations between a fight and a competition and an actual life-threatening experience where someone pulls a gun in your face, kind of thing. And they're completely different. And I can tell you exactly where my brain went because both those moments have that time slowing effect,
Mm.
but at the same time, they're completely different because in the MMA ring or octagon, whichever you end up in, I actually preferred the ring personally, but it was still a very calculated, it was still a very rehearsed kind of thing. What did I practice? How am I going to beat this guy? Okay, this is his skill set, and your mind slows to be able to go through that whole process. When that gun's in your face, is I just hope he doesn't have the guts because he's got the advantage because all he has to
Mm.
do is twitch his finger, that kind of thing. And it changes your whole process. And Jordan understood that because he may not have had it just pointed at his face, but he's probably heard those bullets whizzing by. He's probably been in that situation. And your brain is a very wonderful tool because it actually protects you from what's going on. And this is one thing about consciousness is it will provide for you the defense mechanisms for what's going on. Now, what we see with PTSD is it doesn't let go of those when you get out of that situation, and that's the problem with it. But yeah, Sanderson doesn't have that perspective where I think Jordan did, and I think that comes through in the writing. Even with the difference between Matt and Kulin versus Valda and Galad, we get a very detailed, scripted fight with Galad and Valda, but we get a flashback of these things happened and I did what I could to survive with Matt. Sorry if I
Um,
derailed us there, but yeah.
no, but that is we ended up on for a chapter that we each only had one note. We ended up on that for a while.
Well, I had
Uh,
two
ch-
notes because I had well, one note was combined. It was Bella,
mhm.
and then it was the cartoony death of the guy. But then the second one
Well,
was the Van and
our
theft thing.
little rant though there segues nicely into chapter 36 because it opens back with Rand, but not with his point of view yet, but with Nynaeve, which is cool because yeah, okay, we've seen Rand a couple of times since he went in there. What the heck are they doing? All they're doing are being batteries for this link. So what's going on there? And so it's nice to get a Nynaeve point of view, and he does a pretty good job with Nynaeve writing her. Um, as far as the characters he does well with versus not. Uh,
Well, and
but
there's a nice little twist there with Alana
yes,
being there
yes.
because it
But
was like, oh, sneaky little Morden.
yeah, sneaky, sneaky. But before we get there, there is a uh something I ranted about last time of the way he wrote in the time with Egwene and it was kind of DM exposition. He doesn't make it exposition like here, but he still kind of shoots himself in the foot, I feel like, by giving a specific time. Of Nynaeve thinking right off the bat, right at the on the first page of the chapter, she thinks about how long it's been, about how it's only been, you know, they'd been standing like that, frozen for a good 15 minutes. When I write or when I narrate, when I'm running a tabletop game or whatever, unless it is critical to the moment, I try not to give a time because I would rather your imagination fill in the blanks because it's more meaningful that way. But also for something like this, it's really hard to envision, well, how much time would that take? And Jordan's already given you an out. Why box yourself in and why limit the imagination by giving a specific time? Time is weird here.
Hmm.
Why would you even be able to give how would Nynaeve know? From Rand's point of view, which again, back to the difference, we really think those were mostly or totally written by Jordan before he passed. He doesn't. In fact, his comments from inside Rand's head are about how time is warping, about how reality is warping.
Hmm.
About, I mean, we talked last time about how that great little line about at least that's how his mind chose to interpret things. Well, there should be a bit of that with Nynaeve as well.
Sorry for the hiccup there. I had a medical emergency. Uh, and Heath was mid-sentence and he forgot what he was saying. So hopefully we can continue
It's
our
just all right. We need to
thought
move
there.
on anyway because the more interesting thing, really, rather than griping, is the very end of this section. You mentioned that she finds Alana and sneaky little Moradin had. Now, I don't know that we ever get an explanation. I believe from
Hmm.
what I'm trying to recall, we get a suspicion that I think that the Dark might know that Alana bonded.
Hmm.
Did Varen
Well,
tell or have to tell somehow, or how did they know about Alana?
no, she disappeared. Remember, and Cadsuane was investigating it,
Yes.
and they were the mystery of her disappearance, and Rand saying she was up north somewhere, and that's the last we hear of her.
Mhm.
And now it makes sense because we can say Morden came in there with the true power, took her,
Yeah.
and basically took her up north for this very purpose. And I think that was the two things we were supposed to bring together.
Yeah. There is a boy, how did they find out? But they did. And it's not inconceivable, and we don't really need it's not something we need hints on. I was just kind of thinking back, did we get any
Well, I
hints?
mean,
Because
Morden would know because what was the Black Aja, uh, E- Ezra, the one that was at the Shadow Logoth battle, the one
oh
that
yes, yes,
beat
yes,
that beat
yes.
him in book 6, but she swore fealty to him and everything,
The
and we
one that
knew,
releases Simirhaj. Yeah.
yeah, and we knew she was a black. Well, she also knew Alana was bonded too
Okay, I missed that.
because she
Okay.
was there when the when they first discovered the death gates at the manor house that they were staying at when all the Trollocs attacked. So she was there for all of that, and she knew Alana was bonded to.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I somehow completely missed that, which is kind of a big effing deal. Because of that connection too, and Sneaky Morden, what a Machiavellian great idea of I've got this personal connection to you that I am going to manipulate to destroy you.
Hmm.
It is, awesome. But then also, what a great wrinkle of, oh no, it's like, the Battle of Helm's Deep, uh the 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 good guys are already outnumbered, but now the bad guys also have this secret weapon. So now it looks like, well, yeah, they're outnumbered, but maybe they can at least hold their own until Gandalf gets here. And oh no, they just blew up the wall with magic powder. And it's kind of one of those twists at the end when the good guys are trying to fight back and aha, but the bad guys have an ace up their sleeve. So it's a great moment, but it's also a great, we've come full circle with Nynaeve and her herbs, right? Of, oh yeah, this matters now because
Hmm.
she is trying to keep Alana clinging to life so that this doesn't happen. But there's there's an interesting little tidbit here that I don't know what to make of because my note here is I feel like this is a clue, but no idea to what, which is when she's trying to pull away from the link and she can't because that's how the link works. Um, Rand had it and he wouldn't let go. Frantic, she tried to batter him away, but Rand held tighter as she tried to push against him. He did seem to be channeling it somehow, but she couldn't see the weaves. She could feel something, but with the howling wind and the strange nature of the pit, it was like a tempest swirling around her. The power was wrapped up in that somehow. And that just made me go, huh, what does this mean? This has to be some kind of a clue as to what Rand is doing because it's not just a sword fight with Moradin, as he said when he touched the black and actually confronted the essence of the Dark One. But it's not like a power fight, Rand and the one power versus the Dark One and the true power, which we'll see next time when we actually go back inside Rand's head. So what's he using the power for? And is he even using it consciously? Because when we see him, it doesn't seem like he's actively channeling, but from Nynaeve's point of view, he's drawing a bunch of the power and he's using it for something.
Hmm. Uh, unless we have a time lag here from what he's going to do in the next part we see
Hmm.
him.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
might be true. But also, what is the power other than just a manipulation of the weave? And he is face to face. He's gone plaid. He is face to face with the weave right now.
yeah. As the lore of the world is the one power is what drives the loom that
Hmm.
weaves the pattern.
Yeah,
So
if you think of a life as a thread, well, every fiber that's in the thread is what is manipulated by
mhm,
using the power. That's why you can heal with it because you can integrate that thread of life. That's why you can kill with it because you can destroy
tear.
those
Mhm,
threads. Yeah.
yeah. All right. I just wanted to point that out, see if anyone else had any ideas, and also hopefully as a
Well,
reminder to myself as we go further to see if there's something I'm not remembering, and that becomes more clear
well,
later.
this is a great reminder of what Jordan actually said about this isn't magic. This is when he was asked about his physics background, he said the only real manifestation really is that the what you would call magic, and he would get offended when you called it magic, was a physics of this world.
Hmm.
And the ability to manifest that in these people's lives was there was a structure to it. It wasn't just and then this happened because poof, you know, it was actually a physics of the world that he was trying to bring out. That's what he thought made it different than other fantasy novels.
And it certainly does. It certainly reads different, certainly impacts different, and
Mm.
the success speaks for itself. All right. Well, then we switch to Matt, and I I actually it's not a lengthy bit, but it's got some heft to it. It's most of this chapter is this one section of Matt in the middle, and it's one of the better Matt sections he writes.
Well, he
It
actually has some of the wisest words
mhm.
in the whole last three books out of Matt's mouth, which is we can still lose if Rand wins because they were
Mhm.
like, oh, the real battle's in Shale Ghul, and he goes, no, we can still lose if Rand wins
Yeah.
because there are
I mean,
Trollocs in the world.
yep. Yeah, and even with how much they've weakened us already, they can destroy even if they don't wipe out humanity, they can destroy humanity enough that essentially you're left with another breaking
Mm-hmm.
because that's how the civilization was destroyed and humanity had to claw back and rebuild civilization. Well, the same thing can happen with a massive destructive, genocidal war and civilization is destroyed and it takes a long time to rebuild. That their
Yeah,
world would essentially be destroyed.
I was discussing this with some religious friends, Jehovah's Witness, and we were talking about Ukraine and Russia and Iran and all of these things, and they're like, "Oh, the revelations and all this stuff," and I was like, "Well, that may or may not be true," and but people are dying, and when you talk
Mm-hmm.
about the end of the world, it's the end of the world for that person,
Yeah.
and so yeah, Rand may save the world, but how many people are going to get eaten by stray Trollocs, even if they disband the army, they don't kill them all? How many people are going to be affected by the famine that follows or all of these other things? How many people lost their parents because they're fighting in this war? It's it may not be the end of the world, but it's the end of the world for someone.
Mm-hmm. Here is. Uh,
I guess that's why I'm the bleeding heart liberal of this.
uh, I think technically speaking, I really think the big reason this is such a good Matt section is because even though some of the elements are there that we don't like, some of the, as we've said before, the Marvel humor, the
Mhm.
MCU humor, it those elements are there, but he never belabors any particular point. It's as it should be. It's an aside. It's a it's a bit of set dressing that, yeah, that might catch your eye a little too much than it should when it should be background, but it doesn't take over the scene. It's just
Mhm.
not perfect. Uh and there's a great example of this about halfway through. There's this funny line that Matt thinks. Well, actually, even to start with, you're like, why is Matt the general of generals? Why is he teaching people how to sharpen sticks and make a palisade? Oh, because he's running away from the Death Watch guard. Why? Oh, because they want him to do something he doesn't want to do, and it can very easily, and in fact, it has. We have seen before how Sanderson goes overboard with this stuff, but he never really goes overboard with the silliness.
Which
Um,
which actually here is staying in character because Egwene's right to say you pass judgment. Matt is the least judgmental person in this whole
mhm,
series. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, and there's actually
you,
I have a thought of why that is because there's something that hit me during the last battle in the next chapter from the
well,
Tam point of view that made me go, oh yeah, yeah, there you
you
go.
even get a hint of that because you see Min arguing with Tuan over the lady that Tuan sentenced to death just because of a
Yeah.
prophecy, and Matt is agreeing with Min in his head as she's arguing for
Hmm.
this thing, and it's like, yeah, you can't that this is the society that will judge you for something you didn't do, and now you're making me do that thing, you know. It's
Hmm. Yeah. Um,
which
but
is
anyway,
actually why he's the right man for the job, by the way.
yeah. So the example here, kind of halfway through, is he has this thought. It's on 610 here, for me, and
I will
Matt
ask you
wished.
one thing as
Yep.
we're finishing up here. I should ask you at the beginning of this book, since we have different versions.
Hmm.
Sometimes you start quoting from the middle of a paragraph?
Yeah.
If you're gonna do that, tell me what the beginning of the paragraph
Yeah,
is.
that's why I'm trying to find it because I have
Yeah.
it written on my notes, but I'm trying to find the actual paragraph so I can get um so we get a setup here with him and quarterstaves, which again is like Bella, it kind of hit me here. This moment of this is fan service done right because, haha, quarterstaff, get it? Remember the thing, but he doesn't belabor it, and he doesn't shine too bright a light on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there. Um, Oh yeah, okay, so here it is because this train of thought starts with him thinking about uh the Death Watch guards, and he runs into Egwene and he says, "Sorry," he said, only half listening, "but can we walk on toward Aes Sedai quarter of the camp? They won't follow me there."
Mm-hmm.
So this is where this train of thought starts, with this interchange with Egwene as he's walking and talking to Egwene. But then after he says that, he thinks maybe not. If all Death Watch guards were like Khared, maybe they would. Khared would drive after a man falling off a would dive after a man falling off a cliff in order to catch him, which is makes me chuckle because actually that's a great way to sum up this great little side character that we don't see a lot, but from what we did see, yeah, if you're my man and my job is to get you and you jump off a cliff, I'm coming after you. Don't care how tall the cliff is, I'm going. So a little bit of a chuckle there. Um, and then you get this back and forth with Matt and Egwene. Egwene started back seeming displeased with Matt. How was it Aes Sedai could be so perfectly emotionless, yet still sorry, I had to get my lenses changed and I don't have my glasses and I have to find the right distance for my
Yeah,
aging eyes.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
except I broke down finally and I got me some readers so that I can
Haha.
because I have
Um,
to read so many papers, my head was starting to hurt that
yet still let a man know they were disapproved of him. Come to think of it, an Aes Sedai would probably follow a man off a cliff too, if only to explain to him in detail all the things he was doing incorrectly and the way he went about killing himself. Um, and so pause there for a second because now we get to the actual line I was trying to get to, which is this Sanderson made a funny, but that's because we have a great setup, we have a payoff, and the punchline is pithy. You're building up and you're getting a chuckle along the way, and then you get the laugh out loud dark humor at the end, but the punchline is a single sentence. And that's really like go back to that first chapter that we spent so long on groaning and complaining about because of how bad it was terrible. I yeah, it seems like a dick thing to say to the professional author, but that was really not a good chapter. Those first couple of chapters of Matt and Talmanes and the band, they just weren't good, and in large part because he just wouldn't shut up. Both Sanderson and Matt. And so when you get to the punchline, you have all these are setups for a joke. This is why Jimmy Carr is so funny to me because this is the way he works. Is he'll make you chuckle with his setups and then he makes you laugh out loud with the punchline. And his punchlines are sharp and on the point. And it's just a single sentence. Matt wished so many of his thoughts lately did not involve feeling like he was the one jumping off the cliff. Yeah, that's it's it's Matt. It's on point. It's within character. It is absolutely something he would say, or think, as it were. And it is being built up to with all of these moments all along the way, sprinkled throughout here, where he's feeling harried. And then he gets to this train of thought about jumping off a cliff. And then he realizes, why are so many of my thoughts make me feel like I'm the one jumping off a cliff? It's done well. How much of that is just practice with Matt? How much of that is in the moment? You
or how
know,
much of it is a broken clock is right twice.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I say that not to be pessimistic, but he kind of does go a little over in the preceding conversation about honest work and it wouldn't kill you and da 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 da, and it's just like okay.
yeah. Um, then we get this very brief scene with Perrin. Perrin finally wakes up, finally figures out how to wake up and step out of the dream world. And then Mr. Luhan finds him. So he
Yeah,
appears right outside of the camp. And
I like that it was Mr.
yeah.
Luhan there, Master Luhan there, but at the same time, I almost wish we, because of our dream world connections to things and how impactful that is, he would have been thinking about Master Luhan
Yes.
when he went
Yes.
down. Like it would have been something that connected him to the real world because Master Luhan was there.
Because otherwise his chain, since he started training with Hopper, his connection to reality was always Fail. And the last time we saw him, that's how he got land fear. That's how he got past land fear is no, forget about her. Fail. Think about Fail.
Mhm.
Got to get back to her. Got to get back to her. So why didn't he appear next to her?
Yeah.
Or maybe he was thinking about where she's supposed to be, which is Marilore, you know, which is also where he had gone to in the world of dreams to see if a gateway had opened for him. You know, Fail's supposed to be here. I need to get to her. I need to see her. And so he goes out, he's able to wake up because he's trying to get to her and he's thinking about her being here, but she's not here, you
Hmm.
know. And there within that could be a stray thought of, you know, she'll be with my people, she'll be with the Two Rivers people, blah blah blah, whatever, and then that's that little connection there rather than just, you know, uh poetic convenience. That yeah, it's poetically it makes sense and it's good literarily that, oh, of course Master Luhan is the one to find him. Yeah, but to your point about RJ and him getting annoyed if you would call his magic, no, it's just physics. It just works differently.
Hmm.
It's they are able to manipulate physics in ways that we cannot or don't understand. And so, but it is a physics based world, it is a rules based world. All right. Um, Then we get to chapter 37, which is appropriately titled The Last Battle. And that's what it is it is the battle. And we get the setup from Matt about how, no, this is it. We don't have time to fight a protracted war. We have to win here.
Hmm.
And then a little bit later, he's going to use the analogy of playing cards of you can lose 99 hands and still come out ahead if you make that right bet at that right time and you win that big pot. So yes, on the grand scale, the last battle has been a months long campaign, but then it all comes down to a battle because they're losing, and Matt's got to find a way to get to that one hand and make that right bet on that right hand. Um, and I had to stop because kudos to him. Uh, it feels more like Sanderson than RJ, and like I said, I feel like what was more important to Jordan when he knew his time was running short was getting the bits with Rand right, because this all started with this vision that just kind of popped into his head of the very ending, and so he's working backwards from there. And the whole reason we started this is because it's all about setup and payoff, and modern writers, especially TV show writers and movie writers, don't seem to know how to set things up. So there's either a payoff with no setup or a setup with no payoff, you know. And Jordan has been setting this up the whole time. And so in order to make that ending that he cared so much about land, he's got to set it up. Um, so that's why I feel like this is probably more Sanderson. And so kudos to him because that is one hell of an opening. The way we start with Rand, or the way we start with Lan, and the way he's riding out, you know, as this battle is opening up, uh, it made me think of when at the end of, or the beginning of Return of the King, when the Rohirrim ride out of their camp, and they're all converging, and that was just, so I had to stop for a second and watch the scene. That made me want to stop and watch that the Battle of Pelennor Fields and the late great Bernard Hill as Theoden King. Um, and there's this interesting parallel there that I hadn't thought about, because the link I clicked on when I looked up Battle of Pelennor Fields is the person who put up the clip actually started it right before, which I wasn't thinking about, but which is really important for that setup, is that you have this long setup, much like with the joke. You have this longer setup, but then you have that bit right there before the punchline about the jumping off a cliff. Well, you have this long setup for the arrival of the Rohirrim, but the you know punctuation there is the Witch King, the lead uh uh bad guy, breaking Gandalf's staff and saying, "You have failed." And again, Gandalf is basically, he's an archangel,
Mhm.
there to shepherd humanity, you know, and protect them from the darkness. "You have failed," he says to Gandalf. And Gandalf looks, Sir Ian McClellan for a reason. I mean, he nails that look of terror, borderline despair of, "Oh my gosh, I have." And "You have failed. The age of men is over." And then you get the sound of the horns before the scene shift. The camera shifts to show you the riders cresting the hill. That's why that scene is so impactful, is because you've already had this set up, but then the age of men has failed. And who knows better about the precarious nature of the age of men than the king with no land, the last king of Malkir, leading the Malkiri, and how many of them are not even Malkiri, but
Mhm.
people who have flocked to that idea. And so they're the ones riding out to stem this tide, to be the vanguard, the tip of the spear, to say,
This
no, no, the age of men has not
this
failed.
is so funny because it goes right into our last episode of the precariousness of manhood. The precarious man is to always be renewed. And like you said, land is the man with the king without a land. You have to survive every day. That's the nature of life. You have to survive every day. And there, what is war but just survival?
So that clip led me to another clip, which is, you need to go look this up if you haven't heard it. Tolkien read The Lord of the Rings. And so you can find a clip of Tolkien reading this scene from the book. And that was interesting to me too, because they didn't do this. Jackson didn't do this in the movie, but that's because Jackson knows how to make film. And they had basically already done this, and you don't want to redo this scene. It's okay because it takes longer to get through the book. It's okay to have this moment, which is a redo of a moment, which is that in the book, Bernard Shaw doesn't portray this. He does something a little bit different, but in the book, he hunches over. He's hunched up, and it is a callback to when he was kind of hunched, like an old man. Yeah, he's old, but he still has life left in him. That's the whole point of, the king would remember his strength if he grasped his sword. So we've already had that moment, and we don't need to redo it in a much tighter time span. No, I'm not done. So in the book, he's hunched over, and there's all this great poetic language from Tolkien about, is it over? Is the age of man lost? Is there no hope? No, damn it. And he straightens up. And then he gives his speech about, you know, uh, uh, a red day, a dread day, spears will be washed in blood. He gives that speech after he has this brief moment of, "Oh, look at that. We're doomed. We're too late." No, no, it doesn't matter. We're charging because we're men, damn it. Um, then we switch to Elaine. Um,
Yeah, I had a note here that's more probably on the philosophical level, but uh, let's see. So I'll let you start. Because
Well, I had a couple thoughts here because we start nicely. We're right in the middle of battle. So he he sets up this charge of the Rohirrim, if you will, this charge of the Valkyrie, and then he cuts away, which is cool because again, the figs and mice are more exciting here. He cuts away, but then as I've used the example before, that climactic battle in Return of the Jedi, you cut away to a different kind of action, which which helps keep the high going, if you will.
Mhm.
So we cut to Elaine and Birgitte being attacked by Drakkar, or kind of walking into the middle of this attack by Drakkar.
Yeah, and
Um,
what I want to map out from a philosophical level in the metaphysics of this world is the Drakkar eat the souls.
mhm.
So what does that do
We got
to
half a soul eaten. Yeah.
yeah, well,
What
what
does
does
that?
that
What the heck does that mean?
yeah, what does that do to the soul? Because we're thinking that the threads in the pattern,
Uh-huh.
you know, and we talk about rebirth and all of these things. How does that fit in? Is what I was kind of just thinking of. I was like, well, I mean, the body's there and it's gone. Okay, we can see that because you die in the dream world, that would happen as well. But it what's the next step? Does it stay
Oh,
within the Drakkar till the Drakkar
yeah.
dies and then
Oh, man, you just
or
sent
is
me
it
down a.
because the Dark One is the ruler of the dead? Are they just sucked into that realm?
So I just had this thought of why is it and what happened? And we have another example of this of the Ogier who got caught by Machin Shin.
Hmm.
And it's like he and Vered says it's as if he has no soul. But the body's still living. And same thing with Drakkar victims. That body keeps breathing, the heart keeps beating, but there's just nothing in the mind. So, and you brought up the world of dreams, and it just made me realize, and I've never had this thought before, but this is maybe one of those fun rabbit holes we can go down after we're done with the series of why is it that if you die in the world of dreams, you die? But if your soul is taken, the body keeps living. Because there is some kind of spiritual soul connection to the world of dreams and the waking world. So you could almost say that's your soul running around in the world of dreams.
Hmm.
And when it gets killed, the body dies in the waking world. Why? And why not with this? It's a bit odd. Again, it makes me wonder what was Jordan's thought process? What is his conception? And what is he trying to say about the nature of the soul and its
Hmm.
connection to the physical body?
Well, and then again, add to that the fact that the Dark One has he can manipulate souls.
Mm-hmm.
We see that in book one, where he's bringing back Carrie Al Thor and all of these things. You know, it's and he's his realm is the dead, and he does it with Erengar and Isengard. You know, it is the Drakkar just fast tracking that process, and that's how they feed, or is there something else? And this is why I'm like, what do we mean by killing the Dark One with Rand? Are we destroying him himself? Because that would actually destroy a whole metaphysic with where do the souls go after that point? Where who is responsible for that? And yeah, it's maybe it's a plot hole or maybe it's a deeper conversation that Jordan meant to fill in the blanks with the outriggers.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was just an interesting thought that came to my mind because
Yeah.
we talk about where the soul is and then these things were eating it. So it's like, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Um, then we get to she walks into the middle of this Drakkar attack because she's on her way to the command tent because the last thing Matt does when he realizes they're here and they're here earlier than we thought they would be is we're changing the plan. We're changing it all. Go spread these new orders. And Elaine is on the way, and when she gets there, um, she they have this brief back and forth, which is pretty good, well written, and she has this recognition of for me, it's at the very top of the page. And she says, "You knew I was coming," Elaine said after Matt gave a few more orders to his aides, "and you anticipated the anger your changing the plans would cause. Burn you, Matrim Coffin." Um, and he explained, uh, then why change it? Elaine, Matt said, glancing at her, "Everyone put me in charge against my will because I can't have my mind changed by the Forsaken, right?" That was the general idea, Elaine said. "Though I'd guess it has less to do with that medallion of yours and more to do with you having too thick a head for compulsion to penetrate." And the setup makes you chuckle, and then just a very brief, "bloody right," Matt said. He did another funny, because then he doesn't belabor the point. It's just bloody right. Now back to the matter at hand. He doesn't belabor the point because he doesn't have time to, because dang it, we've got a battle to win. We're in the middle of a fight here. Elaine, the Queen of Andor, and the political leader here just, nearly got killed.
Mm-hmm.
So then bloody right, and immediately back to it. Anyway, if the Forsaken are using compulsion on our people in camps, they probably have a few spies armies, blah, 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 blah. So we get
Which
this
to me
great
was a
moment here.
little annoying because yeah, it was a slightly okay banter moment, but to our point about the hubris of these freaking people in charge, mostly Egwene and Elaine,
Mm-hmm.
she should have known that's exactly why he was in charge. And the fact that she's upset over him changing the plan after having dealt with Bashir, after having dealt with, Gareth Bryan and all of these things, is like, yeah, you should
See,
have known that. Why are you pissed off?
for me, it works for a couple of reasons. One, because he doesn't make her dumb, that she does get it. She just doesn't, or she does understand it. She just doesn't like it. And she doesn't like it because, from her point of view, one, at the very least, I'm the actual one in charge. You're the general. So at the very least, I should know. And Queen Elaine is Queen Bee. So it makes sense for her that she would be ticked off that at the very least you didn't find a way to keep me in the loop. Um, but then also as the back and forth continues, is what the hell? We spent a week in detailed planning, and you knew all along you were just going to change it at the last second. Well, I thought I might, but it really only came to me at the last second. So Matt is right, but you can at least see where Elaine is coming from. Um, and I think that lends itself to my other thought on this section, which is that, to me, Elaine isn't being insufferable here. She's being kind of bitchy and annoying, but because he doesn't belabor the point, because he doesn't drag it out, and because the situation warrants it, Elaine isn't being the person we have been railing about for so many books now. Because no, actually, in this situation, my note that I wrote was, the situation warrants a bit of Queen Bee. And then I thought I'd be clever, and I went back and I added two E's to the end of E.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a Queen Bee for a reason, and it's necessary, and someone has to be the boss. Where she is so insufferable is when it doesn't warrant it, or when she goes too far. I mean, even in this section, she has this thought of how she's turned off by how obsequious the servants are. That the Sanchin rule with an iron fist because they have broken their people. And to her, that is abhorrent, but also impractical, because the strength of a nation is the strength of its people, and you have broken these people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what you personally have done a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You broke your guardsmen, you broke your bodyguards, you have run roughshod over people for a number of books now. And that's when we have gotten annoyed with you. Here, she can be kind of unlikable, but you don't hate her. You don't get turned off by her. You don't, oh God, I want to skip this section, you know? I had this thought when I was watching this Korean cooking competition, and the obvious dichotomy between the male-led and the female-led teams. And it gave me this idea that I'll want to explore more when we're done with the books. But I realized the reason so many other people really dislike Egwene in the last half of the series is because Egwene kind of ends up where Nynaeve started. But Nynaeve has this evolution, this growth, where she doesn't change who she is, but she adjusts how she acts and reacts in the world. And that's basically what Elaine was doing as well. Is she started off, it was one of my few compliments about the series was I liked Elaine because she seemed like Elaine, especially Elaine early on, which is, yeah, she's a princess. She comes from this place of ununderstandable to us privilege, but she's still a good person. She's still a real person. She loses that as she becomes Queen Bitchy Bee, as she becomes a bitch boss instead of a bitchy boss or a
Mm.
boss bitch, you know? And Egwene does the same thing of you can understand how she gets to where she is, but because it is so often so over the top, I can see why, in much the same way that in my first couple of rereads, I wanted to skip the Nynaeve and Elaine parts. And then later, as I kind of understood and appreciated them more, even if I started to dislike, even if I still at the time disliked the characters, I read the parts because they were at least more understandable to me and where I was in life at those points. All right,
Yeah,
that
I think this is
rambling.
this is probably a line we could have had in the last episode. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is there is a difference between a boss bitch and a bitch boss.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when you can't lump them together because one is something you can complain about and one is something you should admire. And the same thing with men. There's a difference between a tyrant, which you did bring up in that episode, a tyrant and a protective father or a authoritarian figure that has the best
Mm-hmm.
intentions, right? So there's a big difference between those two. There's a difference between masculinity and tyrant, and there's a difference between a bitch boss and a boss bitch.
Yeah.
So
Well, then we switch to. I like that we get a different. We're in the last battle, and what happens with our main character still matters so much, but it's fitting that we get some different points of view so we can get kind of the normal person viewpoint of what's going on here. So our next section is from Uno's point of view, which is cool, except that I just got done praising him, and this time he writes Uno like he wrote Matt at the beginning. He just goes over the top with, Uno the grumpy, foul-mouthed guy.
yeah, well, and again, I think the showrunners just read Sanderson's version of the Wheel of Time when they did it because this is the Uno you got in the show.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
over the top. The swearing was there, but it was like listening to a 5-year-old swear. They don't quite get the context of it and
Mm-hmm.
use it in the proper way, and then they mouth it like it's a new word. Well, that oozes out in these pages.
Yeah,
And
and
there's
it's
another big problem I had with this section too, but go ahead and keep ranting on Uno for a
well, I'm
second.
curious if your problem is the problem I had, which is that it to me my biggest problem with the way he writes Uno is it takes away from the last couple of pages of this section, which should be a oh crap, oh poopy, oh. So Demandred is here, and he is taking a very active role. When we saw him first show up with the Sharans, we didn't really see him doing much, and oh no, now he's fighting, and he has a full circle, which I had forgotten that a full circle is 72. If you have men and women together, you can go up to 72 channelers. And remember, we've been told before, this is not a linear line, that when you link, it is an exponential curve.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that when you think about how that many channelers being led by one of the Forsaken who has a song reel.
What
And
the
so he just
Yeah,
destroys these people.
yeah, and what my big problem with this end of this section though was Demandred was one of the big don't use balefire people.
Mm-hmm.
And here Sanderson writes him just using it willy-nilly. I
On
mean,
little things, on
on
little
little
people.
things, on little,
Yeah.
yeah, on he's got a 72 person circle going with a Sa'an Grail. I mean, freaking Einar would not have been a challenge to just blow up, right? He didn't need to use Balefire there. And
Mhm.
Demandred was one of the big Forsaken against using Balefire because Demandred is the definition of one of the Forsaken who wants something to rule after they win.
If you're looking at the old D&D alignment chart, he's on the lawful evil corner.
Hmm. But yeah, and so unlike Morden wants everything to end.
He
He
is the
wants
chaotic evil
he
nihilist.
wants the pattern to end. But Demandred is still one of the naive ones that thinks he's going to rule over the new world.
He thinks like Slayer. That's one of the reasons I like that moment with Slayer is, no, the Dark One uses tools. He may punish you, but if you're a useful tool, I didn't make the connection then, but that seems like a very Demandred thing to say.
Hmm.
That I think is why he is the way he is yeah, I think that's how he thinks.
Which is funny
Um,
because the Dark One actually says it about Morden, who is the one who doesn't think that. Yeah.
he's my best tool because he's the most like me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, then we get a scene with Loghain's point of view here, which I like, to points we've made about before. I think Scott and Ideals have both made this point, and we've made it of I wanted more from Loghain because with all of Min's viewings and with, you know, it seemed like Jordan was really setting something up there when he shows up um after to help Sawan and Leanne and Min escape uh uh Tarvalon. Um, and then he just disappears after he gets healed. And that's a big, oh, holy crap moment because it's so huge for two characters. A major character of Nynaeve who, holy crap, did she just do that? But then also someone who you're feeling is like is being set up to be one of the more major minor characters of, oh dude, now he's got his power back. And then he just disappears practically until we see him very briefly in the epilogue of Path of Daggers or Winter's Heart, I don't remember which, when they ambush uh the Tarvalon Red Sisters, and then he disappears again until he shows up um to talk to Rand, and well, what the heck has he been doing? But also you get the ramifications of trying to turn him
Hmm.
and the effect that has had on him.
Well, which is funny because Isomorphic brought up the great line, the we fight for with Andor.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
thought there was a great internal voice here, and then I don't know why Sanderson went a different route afterwards. Because when he, he's he's thinking in his head, she closed her mouth, lips drawn tight. She still feared him. He could
Hmm.
sense that.
Hmm.
Good. And then we get italicized, which is him talking to himself in his brain, his consciousness, his conscience, excuse me, his conscience comes
Hmm.
up. The angel on your shoulder starts talking to him, says, "Was this what you wished for? When you raised the banner of dragon, when you sought to save mankind, did you do it to be feared, hated?" And I was like, this is so good.
Yeah.
Because this is why Loghain is different than Taim, is different
Yes.
than every other false dragon. This is why Loghain was so important for the pattern. And then he ruins it by saying he ignored that voice. And I'm like, why? We want Loghain to be a good guy right now.
He cannot heed the voice, but it should have been that voice gnawed at him and he tried to push it away. Something like that because, you know, he has gone through this traumatic moment, but he's going to come out of it because he has that conscience.
And realistically, what would have been a good moment here would we just get, can you censor, Gabriel asked. I released the bond.
Mm-hmm.
Her envy was sharp and immediate. He can be a good guy. This is where we could have had him be the ultimate good
Yes.
guy, where he
That.
could have said, "Would you like to be released too? But will you still fight by my side?"
Mm-hmm.
And then we could have had a moment with her. Well, she says, "I never thought you'd ask," and actually, no.
Or at the very least, have some emotions, some conflicting emotions mixed in
Hmm.
with the envy that, you know, and that could help that conscious voice whispering to him is she actually, underneath that envy that's sharp and immediate, that voice could be saying, there's more there though. Don't just focus on the negative. Don't just focus on that. There
Mhm.
is a there, because then he goes on to think how, she was just fooling me and I fooled myself by thinking she ever cared when, we had our lustful moments. And that voice could come back of, no, there is a there. It may be underneath the other stuff, but there is a there.
See, the Logain story could have been the long term or the extended version of the Inktar story.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Inktar story
Mm,
was, I did bad things for what I thought were good reasons, and I stopped doing the bad things, and now I had to make up for the bad things. And he came out. Inktar was one of the most heroic characters of the series,
yeah.
where Logain could have been the extended version of one of the most
I mean,
heroic characters in the entire series.
we're on book 14, and
Mhm.
that happened at the end of book 2, and you still think about it and you still reference it because that's how impactful that was.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because it was set up so darn well, and the climax was him fighting in a giant street while everybody just watches. And no, wait, no, that was something different.
The only
Stupid
hope
shit.
I have about that is the guy they have playing Masama is really good. He was
Mm.
fantastic in Last Kingdom, and I hope that he brings that over to playing Masama, because Masama could end up being one of the most important characters in this,
If the series even goes that
if
long,
the
we'll
season.
see her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see.
But actually, my all of those thoughts that I have there about Logain, those thoughts, those notes were actually the next section, because the next section switches to Gawain's point of view, and he's in a a kind of command tent with Egwene looking over what's going on. Yukiri has adjusted her weave to hide it, and so they're looking down, and Brian is there, um, and he's thinking about this, and he looks at Brian, and he has this thought of um, about Brian and what had happened after he had been relieved is, besides he, Brian, argued any of them could be under compulsion. In a way, knowing that he was gave them advantage. At least him they could watch. And Sawan did, holding his arm protectively. I love that moment there of, even within Godwin's point of view, still furthering that connection that Sawan and Brian have made and what that means. And and my first thought was, up there, I don't care how much you pandered to them, you're as canceled as Jordan was, Sanderson, because you can't do that. But
Mhm.
she is being very feminine there. Swan, the former boss bitch, is now being incredibly wifely. Of, this is my man, and I am going to protect you. You know, it differently, but similarly to how you physically and literally protected me after I bonded you my warder.
Mhm.
I'm here to protect your reputation, your legacy, your social, the way other people look at you, because that's what women care about. We're not allowed to say that, but that's important to her, and she's going to make sure he is protected in that way.
Which is actually a little bit of something that I just popped in my head when you said bonded her warder. Wouldn't you feel compulsion? Compulsion is an attack on the mind.
I think you would, if you sensed a sudden shift, if it was dramatic, you would sense a sudden shift in emotion and in personality. But we don't know if this was exactly compulsion. We don't know exactly what Grendel was doing, which I like that they leave it fuzzy like that. But because it was so subtle, I don't think you would, because that bundle of emotions. Now, Pavara would probably feel it, even something subtle, but that's because she's basically sharing a mind with Androl.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
different. The way the bundle of emotions is described, I think something this subtle would go unnoticed. Um, and that, again, that is probably another reason for it to be subtle, is because one of them has a warder. One of them, is a warder, actually. But my main thought though is that it may be trite, but it is also true that the light will triumph because they have each other. I don't think it's an accident that we just had Logain and Gabrel, and we've seen that relationship when it was working more constructively before. And now we see, oh, Logain's in a bad place, and now because he's in such a bad place, Logain, Gabrel, together are in a bad place. But then you switch to this moment of these couples. Now, I've used this analogy before, but in contrast to the light will triumph because they have each other and they actually lean on each other, Stalin was a literal gangster. Hitler, if you look at how the government was run, he basically ran the government like he was a bandit lord, and his top lieutenants were his underlings were vassals with their own little fiefdoms, and he didn't care what they did and how corrupt they were, so long as they gave him what he wanted. And
So
it
it's like
fell
the Dark
apart.
One with the Forsaken.
So it's exactly it's the dark one with the Forsaken. I have to wonder, since he read so much history, if that was a little bit, or if there are other, other similar such elements. You know, if you, gosh, the uh, imperial politics in China, makes Game of Thrones look tame, right? That and I maybe that's I don't know his work as much, so I don't know if Martin was inspired by that in part along with the War of the Roses, but uh you see what happens to those, that when they are pressed, when they are really put under tension, they're hard, they're not strong. So they resist initially, but you keep pressing and it's brittle and it fractures and it shatters. And that is ultimately how the light triumphs over the dark. And we see that here, that when they are at their low, they are, in this case, that's what made me think of this, of, and I don't think it's an accident that we had Logain and Gabrielle, and now we switch to Egwene and Gawain and their connection. And now we have Sawan and Brian literally leaning on each other,
Mm-hmm.
as the world kind of figuratively leans on each other to try and get out of this deep dark hole. Um, and then we get this great scene with Tam's point of view, which
See, I didn't like this scene.
I loved it.
I I know it
And I'll
just
I'll tell you why. And it isn't necessarily because of what's going on. Let me you start. Why didn't you like it?
I think it was an attempt. I don't know. It's like Sanderson wanted to take something that Jordan did and make it his own with the whole flame and void and everything on top of that. And I was just
Mm,
like, it was detail added where it wasn't needed. There was, let me bring somebody in from the prologue with Baird. There was all of these things, all these elements go into it. And it wasn't just a battle scene. It was almost like he was trying to appropriate Jordan
See,
in a way.
I disagree because, see, I was wondering what you were going to say, because again, as I've complained about before, the action's a bit clunky, but it since so much of this is more about Tam's point of view and also about the kind of organization of it, the clunkiness of the action itself didn't bother me. But here's why I disagree: is because to me, this isn't trying to repurpose Jordan's work in the way that modern writers now repurpose Tolkien or whoever, or Jordan, for crying out loud, and the new turning of the wheel, but because it's a payoff, or it's going into more detail for something that we've already had, which I said at the time that I thought one of my favorite scenes in the series, in the whole series, and I wondered how much of it was written or outlined by Jordan ahead of time, which was the sparring match between Tam and Rand.
Mhm.
So what Tam is thinking here was set up when he says it's not a sword technique. No, that's not what it's about. I'd teach the whole army if I had time. and to me, all you're seeing here is you're seeing the detail. Now, it may be too much detail. It may be pulling back the curtain
Well,
when it should have been left
I think
fuzzy.
it's because I know too much about Jordan's inspiration for the one
Mm.
for the void, which is what Buddhists would call the oneness or the not self.
Well, it's yeah. He
And
Lanfear uses the term oneness, so yeah, he even
yeah,
appropriates that.
and because he gets so detailed and then gets it wrong in the end, it almost makes it egregious.
Mm.
Because what the not self is the identification of the emotion, the focusing on the moment, identifying it, letting it slide, letting it go away, and then all of a sudden your perception of reality is enhanced, which would be a great skill if you're fighting, which would be a great skill if you're trying to aim a bow, right? Because if your perception of reality is enhanced, you're more likely to hit. And I think that's what Jordan was going for, especially since he was fascinated with Eastern philosophy.
And
And
because we first are introduced to this through archery,
mhm.
through something that is so precise and focused.
And what people get so wrong on the surface level about Buddhism is they think it's a suppression of your emotion and it's a getting rid of stimuli. No, it is a becoming not subject to your own inner thoughts so you can be more receptive of the real
So
world.
when you say he gets it wrong, what do you mean more specifically? Was there a specific moment or something that Sanderson said in this section that you said, no, that's not right? You know, big red X there. That's
Yeah, yeah, because he grew calm and then the calmness left him and left nothing. Well, it doesn't leave nothing. It leaves reception. It
mm.
leaves it leaves a being in the moment, which is again, it's surface level Buddhism. It's what you get when you just see the don't let your emotions control you part of it.
So this is probably another moment then where Sanderson lets the details get in the way,
Ruin it. Yeah, yeah.
which is what we've complained about, especially with the way he writes action a lot of the times,
Hmm.
is he gets too detailed and then so it doesn't land because the details are off.
I'll bring it back up. I know
Um,
I've brought it up before. I don't know about it if it was in Wheel of Time or not, but it's the PhD in breakdance versus actual
yeah,
breakdancers, right?
yeah.
The we all saw that with the Australian breakdancer. She actually, I went back and I was looking at it. She nailed every element, but it
Hmm.
wasn't good. And she got 0 out of 0 on her score because it's not about the textbook elements. It's about doing the thing. And Sanderson is like, oh, well, this element, oh, I know this about Buddhism, but he doesn't understand Buddhism because he doesn't practice. Now, I'm not a Buddhist, but I've practiced the meditative process and I've practiced the secular parts of it. And there is something to feeling that. And it's a stimulus enhancing thing, whereas he's making it a stimulus repression.
See that I didn't catch that because I don't know the details as much and even the terminology, because back to the point you made earlier that I hadn't thought about is that even the terminology, Jordan uses that when Lanfear talks about uses the Zen term. It's called the oneness in some places. And
Mhm.
so
Well, I'll,
basically
gi-
what
I'll give a very secular example. If you're, I don't know, pick a sport where you have to do something with skill.
free throws.
Free throws. Okay, so you're shooting a basketball. Don't miss. Don't miss. Don't miss. What are you going to do?
You know,
Miss, right? So you actually have to focus on the bottom of the net. You have to focus on your breathing. You have to focus on all these other things instead of focusing on saying, don't miss. And so the oneness should be a matter of taking that bubbling of, I better make this or my people are going to die and all of that and releasing that because
see,
then you
the detail didn't jump out at me because I don't know the detail as much. And I feel
well
like
maybe that's why I'm probably the minority in this opinion.
he got the overall idea right. Like, in some of his action scenes, the the outline of what's going on is pretty good and it's pretty cool, but then you kind of get lost in the details. And the overall idea here is good, and I didn't notice the details. because that's in the first paragraph of this section is when is the point you're making about the calmless left him leaving nothing. And see, I feel like that's somewhat salvaged by the next sentence, which is like a newly painted wall, beautiful and white, that had been just been washed, everything melted away. So he's not teaching it right, but he is explaining it, broadly speaking, correctly. And then but the second paragraph to me is the money shot, because as he begins to act in the void, that's really what matters to me. And this is where I see this as a payoff to what he was telling Rand. Um, when he was this strongly within the void, the arrow would do exactly as he commanded. He didn't know this any more than the sun knew that it would rise, or the branches knew that their leaves would fall. There were not things known, they were things that were. And to me,
Except that the sun doesn't rise, we spin on our axis.
but it is the
Yeah,
point is to your point, what he's explaining wrongly is this right idea of being, of it simply is. And that's, again, that is why Tam said I'd teach it to everyone if I could, if I had the time, because it's not a sword technique. It is a life technique that you can then apply to swords, or to, I would say, you know, Tam, if he's had a rough day, I can see him summoning the void when he's splitting firewood.
yeah. What didn't we get that?
We get it from, so Rand's point of view.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought about that, but that is, he kind of accidentally sort of goes into that mind space when he's splitting firewood at the very beginning of Eye of the World.
Well, and we also get Rand describing in his head about Pam fixing a fence or something and being in that mode when he's doing that too. But
Yeah.
no, this is one of those things that I think was set up by Jordan, but he didn't have written out.
Mm.
And he got a writer that didn't understand what he was going for. And I
Yeah.
guess unless you've practiced or you've really studied Eastern philosophy and what it actually meant, I can see this is really, I guess maybe my annoyance is here is this is what Western people are doing with mindfulness and the meditative processes and stuff. That's very surface level, and it's very not exactly what it was supposed to go for. And I think the little bit wrong makes it, that little bit that's not right makes it so wrong.
So
It's just
interesting.
Western psychology and Western mental health approach. That's why we're so heavily medicated, because it's like, oh, it's about suppressing that emotion that you have. No, it's not about suppressing that emotion.
Um,
It's about being reconnected to reality, is what it is.
so I had this thought. The thought I had in this moment, and what one of the reasons I liked it so much is it just, I realized, isn't it interesting? Rand had to learn the void. Perrin had to learn the wolf. Matt just is. That's where he lives.
Yeah,
That's
he
just who
he
he
he lived
is.
in the void. Yeah.
And in fact, you know, Matt is a overall kind of consensus fan favorites. But if you talk to people who he's not a fan favorite for, a lot of the times, basically what they'll tell you is, yeah, his scenes are really fun and he's a fun character, but he doesn't have an arc because he just is. Once
Well,
he gets
except he
past the
does have an arc.
dagger,
He does
yeah,
have an
I
arc, and
disagree, but
yeah, the arc is Matt had to learn responsibility.
mhm. Matt had to learn what to do with this natural gift.
Mm-hmm.
He had to apply this natural gift to the greater good, that he was in a position to do something really important, and he had to learn to accept that. But he didn't have to learn how to be the way Rand and Perrin did. Um, so a little bit later, a couple pages later into this, there's this moment where I went, and I could almost hear a little bit of RJ here, and maybe some survivor's guilt, because Tam has this thought about Perrin, and about, him suddenly showing up at the edge of their camp, and Perrin was safely in Mayan, where he would likely spend the rest of the last battle. A man didn't quickly recover from the type of wound that lad had taken, even with Aes Sedai healing. So that's the first couple of sentences of this paragraph. But then the punchline here is, it would probably drive Perrin near mad to miss the fighting, but sometimes that happened. It was part of being a soldier.
Hmm. So
To me, that's that veteran mentality that
yeah.
Jordan
And
brings
do we
into
know
it.
the history that he might have been pulled out for injury or something?
I don't know, but that was my first thought, because family history. Um, I have an uncle who did 1.5 tours in Vietnam, including one of those. I don't remember if it was the first or the second one, was during the Tet Offensive. So major fighting. And I can't remember if I've told this story before, but uh, my first couple of years in college, I would drive down because they lived a lot closer than my parents did. I would drive to see this uncle, and my dad told me he talked to me way more than he ever talked to them, and he didn't know why. If it was because enough time had passed, or if it was because it was an inquisitive youngster, or what. But
Or because he was trying to keep you from the same
yeah,
feelings and stuff
or
that
that.
he had? Yeah.
But his wife had done up this little case of his ribbons and medals and the folded American flag and all that, and was mounted up on the wall. And one of the times I was down there, I was looking at it, and I asked him where his Purple Heart was. And he said, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Well, wasn't your second tour cut short because you were wounded?" And he said, "Oh no, I just fell off a bike." And I mentioned this to Dad the next time I saw him. I was like, "You said it, he was wounded, and had to leave, and he just fell off a bike." And my dad looked at me and kind of chuckled and said, and he told me the actual story, that somehow one of the men had acquired a bicycle, and because they were on this large fire base, and my uncle was the in charge of the battery there. He was the battery commander. And so in order to more quickly get around and make his rounds and inspect the various positions, both the battery positions and the defensive positions, he would use this bicycle to ride around. And one of the evenings he was making his rounds, they started taking incoming mortar fire. And so he's pedaling back to the HQ, because it's likely that means, they're going to have a fire mission, but also get the heck out of the way. There are mortar rounds coming in, and a mortar round lands close enough to him to blow him off the bike and into one of these defensive trenches, and it wrecked his back. And so he stayed for a while longer until it got to the point where he couldn't get out of his cot, and he had to be medevaced out, and he couldn't return. It wasn't something that you could fix in theater. So to him, no, I just fell off it. And it didn't dawn on me until way later. One of the other stories he told me, and because it was kind of weird and awkward, because it kind of, what do you say after this? So the conversation just kind of dies, is he told me about a time that he had to, because most of the time he was behind the wire because he was the battery commander. And I don't remember the setup for why they were out there, but they were outside the wire. And when they were headed back, there was this convoy of jeeps and half tracks, and his platoon sergeant told him, "No, sir, you take the chopper." There was room for one more on one of the choppers going back. And he said, "No, sir, I'll just ride. You take no, you take it." Well, that vehicle convoy got ambushed.
Hmm.
And one of the casualties was the jeep that his platoon sergeant was in, and he was killed when an RPG round hit that jeep and blew him up. And ooh, yikes. And then it didn't dawn on me until way later, when actually my dad brought up his dad, because my grandpa didn't fight in World War II. He served in World War II because he scored so highly in his bombardier training that he was kept on to be an instructor. Well, dad just happened to mention, kind of out of the blue, because we were talking about his service history for some reason, and he mentioned that, he didn't realize that at the time until way later, as he started to understand these concept of, oh, I think one of the things that was wrong so to speak, with my dad was survivor's guilt. I think he was racked with survivor's guilt because there were plenty of people that he knew growing up who were drafted, who did serve in combat and didn't come home. And he made the point of how many people did he go through training with that ended up in the 8th Air Force, which I talked about when we talked about Masters of the Air and the ludicrous casualty rates of the 8th Air Force. And so 50 to 75%, death or captured rate from planes that go down. How many men did he go through training with who never came back? And
Mm-hmm.
here he is in a classroom teaching instead of over there. And what does that do to you? And to me, Tam saying that is Tam having seen it
Mm-hmm.
when he was in the companions, having seen it in, the Aiel War of men who couldn't be in a battle for some reason. And oh, on the one hand, thank goodness, but on the other hand, now I'm racked with guilt for these people who did.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I live with the fact that they did and I didn't?
I mean, I was cut off at the pass with military service because I don't know if it's been mentioned since you've been listening, but for Scott and isomorphic, I have congenital heart disease. So I tried to join the military 4 times, and every time I failed the physical. So I tried to try to give back, tried to put forward, pay it forward. And when I was working with airstrike operations, it kind of gave me a little version of that because these guys were going off and they wouldn't always come back. And there was a part of me that was like, I should be out there too because I'm perfectly healthy, but they won't take me. And we if you really live virtuously, which I try to do, I may fail on a lot of occasions, but at least try. Guilt is a good thing because it actually helps you make better decisions in the future. And that guilt, that little bit of guilt that I couldn't get in, I mean, how many of those guys, I say about the ones that didn't show back up, but how many of them came back because I trained them well? You know, we did combatives, we did strength and conditioning. These 2 teeth are fake because of those training sessions. They were very painful for me, but I put everything I had in them
Yeah.
because their life kind of depended on it. And I was a part of that process. I wasn't the whole process, but a 1% part of a process in that profession could be the coming home or not. And so yeah, Ham is doing a similar thing with the Two Rivers guys because he's like, I can provide this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, then we switch to Pavara's point of view with her and Androl doing their thing. So we get a glimpse at, all right, where we left Logain, him sending his people out, go hunt down, you know, enemy channelers and keep an especially sharp eye out for, that was something we kind of glossed over, of his last order from Rand was a letter telling him the seals have been stolen. The shadow has them. You have to find them. That is his last order.
Hmm.
Um, but we shouldn't have glossed over it because as bad and dark a place as Logain is, he's kind of grumbling, why should I even follow his orders? And yet it's interesting that even in writing, Rand makes sure to say please, make sure to say do the best you can.
Hmm.
He's not the same Rand. That's why you are following him, is because he's different. Um
I have a
and
couple of meta comments on
yeah.
Androl and Pavera because the way they're communicating in this chapter,
Mhm.
especially, do you notice a similarity between the way Perrin communicates with the wolves?
Yes, especially at that moment where she says here, but then explains in her head it wasn't really telling him. She just showed an image. She gave him an
Hmm.
impression, so he knew where to open up the gateway. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember the name now off the top of my. I should have looked it up when I had this thought. Was the severely autistic woman who has changed our agricultural industry because she's able to picture things in her head so well, and she talks about the difference between words versus pictures in your
Mhm.
head. And she said, I figured this out and I harnessed it, And now everybody comes to me for the answers to the thing they can't figure out because they're reading words. And that that made me think of the wolf dream, which then now 2 years later, after I saw her explain this thing, we're over analyzing the wolf dream and stuff. I'm like, that's exactly how the wolves communicate. So basically, it's like this super autistic communication system. But then the other connection I had here was Pavara and Andrel's bonding, where they bonded each other.
Uh-huh.
It's the difference between hookup culture and marriage,
Ah,
right? It is the orgasm versus the mutual orgasm. And yeah, I don't know where I wanted to
huh.
go with that,
Well,
but
no, that's an interesting point because it leads me to my note on this section, which is also an I don't know where I want to go with this, but it was another moment where I felt like this is a clue to something, and I'm not sure what, but the very end of this is interesting
well, look at the way
because
the that warders and their Aes Sedai and the Ashaman and their warders are. They're tools. They're something for their own gain. So the Aes Sedai, Egwene even has this thought: why doesn't everybody have a
Mhm.
warder when Gawain is useful? But Pavara and Andrel did it to each other,
Yes,
and it is the difference between lust and love.
yes. And one of the things we learn in this chapter is that, and I kind of remember this when we first learn about linking when they use the Bull of the Winds, but it's not in this detail, which is that there is a bit of a psychological connection when you make a link. Not nearly as strong as a warder connection, but it is there. And Pavara thinks about how when she was taught to make a link, you had to be very conscious of keeping yourself separate. Keep yourself yourself. Don't lose yourself when you are in that connection. And so at the very end, there's this moment where they get hit with lightning and it knocks them down. In that moment, she let go of herself. This is the very bottom of 639 for me. And is that one sentence seems to be really important because of what happens next. She did it by accident because of the shock of the impact. In most cases, the link would have slipped away, but Andrel held a powerful grip. All right, and then here's the key thing that jumped out at me, and I'm like, what is he saying here? Again, I feel like this is a clue to something, but I can't quite put my finger on it. I can't quite put it into words. The dam holding back Pavara's self from his own broke, and they mixed. It was like stepping through a mirror, then looking back on herself. And what happens next is what makes me think, oh, something big just happened here because she then does something she absolutely should not be able to do from everything we know about how channeling and how links work, which is she's not in control of the link, and yet she weaves the power. She
Mhm.
creates a gateway. And as she thinks, not only does she manage to weave what she shouldn't be able to do, but she does the most complex thing she knows how to do, and she does it as effortlessly as Andrel.
Mhm.
And again, if Ideal, Scott, one of you, couple of people who actually listen and don't comment, if anyone out there has an idea of what the heck that means, I don't know, but I feel like it's got to be a big effing deal.
And Natasha, just not another list of names here. Let's
Yes.
go with you
Yeah.
know,
Because that's
unless
totally
it
not
was
a
a list
secret
of
code.
names to get people to watch us, but you should have added them instead of just putting the names down.
Yeah.
But that,
Yeah.
yeah, we would appreciate the extension of the channel, but
Okay. But then I have a nitpick when we switch back to Matt's point of view. And this was something I touched on earlier, and we've talked about for a bit, which is that first of all, Demandred wasn't the best general of the dark.
mhm.
That was Samael, and he wasn't at Lews Therin's level again because he was always second fiddle to Lews Therin. Um, there's this moment where Matt is looking at the way things are going, and he thinks The man leading the shadow was good. Very good. Okay, well, first of all, as we've said, he shouldn't be on Matt's level. But the bigger problem here, even if we're wrong and there's stuff in the notes that, you know, Jordan intended Demandred to be a better general than we think he is, whatever. But
Well,
the
very
problem,
very good is right,
yes,
but there's a different. I mean, when you look at the edge of the bell curve for skill in basketball, the worst college basketball player is in the top 1%, right?
yeah.
So he could be in the top 1%, but he's not LeBron
You
James
know,
or
that's a
Michael
good
Jordan,
point.
you know?
Just a little bit in there, just another very brief sentence here could have, I think, made that part of my complaint better, which is that he is very good, even if he's not a great captain or not the best or not better than Matt. But if Matt had just also added the thought of, and he had overwhelmingly superior numbers. He's
Or
got overwhelming firepower and he's good.
or he's really good. Gosh, if I wasn't making up for everybody else's mistakes.
Or that, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm on the back foot and I've got a good opponent. So this is why this is so hard. But the bigger problem I have is that where Demandred's ranting and ravings, where Demandred as a whole is kind of a plot hole for me, is that um we never see him actually commanding the army. He's fighting.
Yeah.
He's up front blasting away.
Well, what and this is where I hate to introduce new characters, but you might have benefited from this. We could have had a great captain that's a Sharan.
Mm,
They're elite in their place of residence for a reason, right?
mm,
There's obviously going to be infighting. There's obvious, just like with the Shanshan, Galgan we get is like barely a step under Matt, right?
yeah.
And he's with the Shanshan army. So it's like this is where the coming out of nowhere benefited us none, because we could have had a great captain that was known amongst the Sharns.
Yeah.
We could have had this. Nobody even tries to invade that area. What was the Princess Bride line? Don't start a land war in Asia, right?
Yeah.
We that could have been the don't start a land war in Shara. That's why nobody
Mhm.
knows anything about them, because we stay away.
Yeah.
And we could have had a great captain there. That was Demandred's number one. Something like that. Again, I would hate to add even more characters to the plot, but that would have made it make more sense.
Hmm.
But also, this is where Samael popping back up could have been beneficial.
Yeah. Um uh it is a bit of a shame too, that and the thing I'm about to bring up here, because um overall it's a pretty darn good Matt section, and it made me think of when Scarlett Johansson got asked about the lack of a romantic subplot in the first Avengers movie, and her answer was, we don't have time for that, we've got avenging to do. and and I think one of the reasons it's such darn good Matt is he's too busy. He meaning Matt and Sanderson are too busy for silliness. Until a couple of pages in, on page 643, it's me for me when he's looking around the room wondering who the spy is. Because one of the
Mm,
things he does here is he plants a seed and then he looks at what's going on, and he sees that Demandred is reacting to an order he just gave before he could possibly have seen what is going on. He tells Lan to do something, and then almost right away, Demandred is he can see that Demandred is setting up to counter that move. So he knows that there is a spy in this room, which is great. Good stuff. Not good stuff is when he's looking around and the room trying to figure it out, and he mentions this Banner General Garich, who we've never heard of before yet. She stood at the side of the room glaring at him. Um, Honestly, women, she did have a nice backside, but Matt had only mentioned it to be friendly. He was a married man. Damn it, Sanderson, you were
mhm.
doing so good there. And then you fell into your old bad habits of, one, the backside joke is distracting. Two, it isn't fitting for the moment. And 3, it's not great overall. It's back to he doesn't really get Matt's character.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff is, it kind of gave me a light bulb moment of, look, if you're going to have a bit of uh um comic relief there, because I mean we do need comic relief here and there because it is a very tense moment. It's a very dark time for the good guys. So one, besides it being something more in Matt's style, why not a callback? Why not, you know, she's mad at him because of something to do with a badger, or because, have a callback to Maiden's Kiss. He recommend, tried to told her that you could get along with Aiel if you played Maiden's Kiss with them, just something like that as a callback to something that has already been established and is more within Matt's style. But the first of all, the commenting on one of your generals, commenting to her face that she has a nice backside. I mean, that's dumb because that undoes one of our favorite moments, which is when he and Brigitte become pals.
Mm-hmm.
Because it kind of unnerves him that she talks so openly about the physical nature of people, and that she wants him to. Not only does he not mind if he checks out women while he's around, but she's like, oh, check out that one. She's like pointing out girls for him. It unnerves him. It's what makes it such an amusing scene, because it's a bit of a, fish out of water moment, a bit of a clash of cultures kind of moment. And so for him to just, it doesn't make any sense for Matt. It's not in keeping with his character of what we've seen before, as well as you are just beating the ever living crap out of that thoroughly ground meat now horse of, but I'm a married man. Oh, damn it, Sanderson, stop it.
Yeah. There, I see what he's trying to do, and I understand it. It just doesn't work because what he's trying to do is harken back to, oh, this is what we complained about with the social psychologist. Everything's a social construct. He's trying to bring back his Two Rivers roots, right? His Two Rivers roots would be, I'm a married man. I can't be doing all these things. I can't even be thinking this. But we know Matt is Matt. Matt never fit in the Two Rivers. That was the whole point. That's why he didn't go back in book 4. Because he loved his people, he loved his family, he loved all of those people, but he couldn't go back to the Two Rivers. He had to explore the world.
Yeah, he was always, well, I'll go back eventually. I'll go back for a visit eventually. But no, I'm still having too much fun here. There's still more to see, more to do, more whatever.
Yeah. So he's trying to bring back the Two Rivers philosophy of, well, the traditional marriage and everything. But Matt never fit in. It's not a good plot. It's not a good character tool for him because he never fit in to begin with. The whole thing about the Badgers was because he was making trouble in an ordered society. That's why he did it. It was an outburst of his character in a place where that made sense. But then we got it out in the world, and the outburst of his character became, wow, I have to do these big things. I don't want to do them, but I might as well because
Yeah.
people
And
need
and
me.
it is a bit of a shame, because otherwise, from this point to the end of this section is pretty good. And it's, again, this is one of the reasons the previous scene with Elaine maybe didn't bother me as much, is because even Matt acknowledges, okay, yeah, Elaine, you have a point, but I'm not telling you what's going on until we step outside. You put us behind a ward of eavesdropping, and then you go somewhere else. Because if you and I are the only ones that kind of have an idea of what's going on here, then you need to be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
We need to split up so that the dark can't take us both out. And so, fine, you're right. If I get taken out, here's, generally speaking, here's the outline of my battle plan. I am trying to draw him in to where I can make that final bet and lay down the cards and hope my cards are a winning hand. And I like it. It's a good back and forth between the two of them. and I think he does a pretty good job of writing the moment as well as writing the characters. Um, and then we switch to Galad's point of view, which he doesn't. Sanderson doesn't seem to have too much trouble writing Galad. I don't know what that says about him, but it makes sense that I mean, and it also makes this is why we said it's fitting that Galad and Perrin end up together. They are awfully similar but different, which is why those moments between them work so well. Um, and then it ends well. So it ends with him getting a message from Matt, and maybe it was because I was already just annoyed. Because then, as I thought about it in hindsight, actually, you know what? This little silly moment um at the end with the note from Matt um in a vacuum, actually, no, you know what? I think this is okay comic relief. I think this is okay silliness. I think I had a problem with it because I had a problem with some of the stuff in the first section.
Mm-hmm.
And as I ranted about in the previous book, the letter he sends to Elaine annoyed the crap out of me. It was just dumb. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't funny. It wasn't silly. It wasn't comic relief. It wasn't happy go lucky prankster Matt. It was Matt's a dummy. And Matt is being a self-deprecating insult comic. That's not who Matt is. Yes.
We had a meme for that, so I guess I know which one we're using.
Yep. And so yeah, it actually is kind of funny. So it's just frustrating that I got distracted. In much the same way that we missed the Black Tower stands with the Lion of Andor of that is a damn good moment.
Mm-hmm.
That is a Theoden the fire the beacons are lit and Gondor and Rohan will answer. Cool. But I got lost there in the silliness. One of the reasons moments like that land so well in Jackson's first three films and the moments aren't as good in the Hobbit trilogy is because there's so much fluff and filler and crap in the Hobbit trilogy. So the actual emotional character and story moments don't land
Mm-hmm.
because they're surrounded by so much junk.
Well, this is why I always bring back like Aesop's fables and stuff, and we need to use these more, utilize these more,
Mhm.
which we kind of went away from in our society. But there were lessons in there,
The
and
Boy
the
Who Cried
one
Wolf is a very
I was
short
about to
story.
say, this is the boy who cried wolf. You cry wolf all the time. Nobody listens when there's actually a
Mhm.
wolf. You try stupid, idiotic banter for 3,000-page books when you have a little quippy one-liner that could be funny.
Yeah.
It just it doesn't land. And yeah, it in a bubble, that's a funny little scene. But in the whole Sanderson series here
Yeah.
of the last three
Yeah,
books, yeah.
even stepping back and kind of again looking at it in a vacuum and not the things that annoy me, even the reaction though is good because he doesn't go over the top because he shouldn't because it's Galad. Galad sees the joke at his expense and Galad sighed. That's it. He just and then
Mm-hmm.
hands the letter to his second in command there of okay, because that's yeah, you get a little bit of a chuckle at Galad's expense, but obviously Galad's not gonna overreact because he doesn't overreact to anything.
Mm-hmm.
So uh nice moment, but also I even like the um Galad's finishing up here of it's such good Galad of well, I can't say I'm sad for this order. My sister has entered the field, it appears. I would keep watch on her. I I love that moment because it is a bit of a jab at Elaine, which I appreciate, but also it's keeping with Galad, but also he's not wrong. Is yeah, somebody oughta somebody who maybe she'll actually listen to since she clearly doesn't listen to Brigitte. All right, well that's all I had, and I wanted to stop there because we're half-ish. Well, actually, we're not even halfway through the chapter yet, I don't think. But we're going to get to the next section is Rand and the Dark One again, and it's lengthier this time than the previous ones we've had. It's actually quite a few pages, several pages long, so there's going to be some more meat on that bone. to discuss because, again, this is the ultimate last battle. This is the real fight. As he said in the last time we saw him of so this is where the real confrontation will take place. But then the confrontation hasn't actually started yet, and now the confrontation is actually starting.
Yeah. So this was a little bit of a longer episode. I know we're halfway through a chapter, but we won't be back for another couple weeks.
Yeah.
So you'll miss one Wednesday, and then we'll be back the next Wednesday after that. My bookmark is actually a page from a dad joke calendar, and I don't know why I kept this one as my bookmark, but it's because I wouldn't. I mean, maybe my son would get it now that he's like 14, about to be 15, but I don't think I'd tell it to like a 7-year-old. The joke is, why did the walrus go to the Tupperware party?
Oh,
He
no.
was looking for a tight seal. Like, I don't know if I'd tell a 7-year-old that if
That works on multiple levels, and the level that we're thinking about is the worst one, which is why it's the best one.
yeah. Yeah, I'm like, that's not really a dad joke. I mean, it's a when okay, so here's another dad joke. How do you know when do you go from a dad joke to a bad joke?
They're all bad jokes.
Or when do you go from a bad joke to a dad joke?
Eh.
When it becomes apparent.
Oh, that's
That's more of
painful.
just kind of like a good bad joke because as a parent, you wouldn't be telling that joke to your very young child.
I
You
don't get it. Yeah, you will. You will when you learn some SAT words. Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, we will see y'all next time where we will finish up this chapter and then see how much further we get. I'm trying to remember actually where this chapter leaves off. Um, because there's still plenty to go. There's still plenty left in the book after this chapter. So we'll
Well,
see how far we make it before we have to take a week off, and then we'll be wrapping up before too terribly long here.
well, I've got great news for your isomorphic before we leave. Heath did not say, uh, I didn't really have anything to say about this chapter for
I
chapter 37.
I
So
thought I might. That is why I looked at it and said, "Whoa, this is a huge chapter. Maybe we should do a quickie." No, it's the battle, and we don't often have a lot to talk about with the action sequences. But to his credit, there's a lot going on here. Even though you feel like it should just be fast paced, watch the action, and there's a lot going on here. And it to your point, one of the things that slows it down in our analysis is we're constantly shifting points of view.
mhm.
So it keeps changing what is going on because if it's all just Matt, well, there's a lot less depth there because it's all kind of the what the kind of the one note. Even if that note is a very good note, it's still one note. And
Well, and
now we keep bouncing around.
and there's a massive difference between a battle scene and the battle scene that is the brink of the end of the world.
Yeah, that's
Because
true.
there's a lot metaphorically going on
Yeah.
in this battle scene versus the attack on Karheen or
Mhm.
the battle one we kind of really glossed over at the end of Crown of Swords when he's fighting the Shanshin there, right? No, not Crown of
Path of
Swords.
Daggers.
Path of Daggers. Yeah, Path of
Yeah.
Daggers. So there's a difference between a battle and the most consequential battle on
True.
a spiritual level.
Ragnarok.
They're yeah.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, we will see y'all next time.
later, guys.